make that bang little less.
Hello. Hello. Sorry?
Good morning, viewers. So we welcome all of you in this learning session, wherein since last 3-4 days, we have been doing this webinar on the knowledge enhancement under GST. So today we are on the 4th day of the session where we have a renowned expert in the field, Mr. Madhukar Hiregange, who will be taking us through important aspect of the valuation under GST. What are the principles of GST under valuation? How these principles are different from the valuation principles under the Central Excise, Customs Act and Service Tax Act. What are the past legal precedents under the erstwhile indirect taxes in the valuation, which could have impact under GST? What precaution we need to have while making valuation for any supply of goods or services, and the relevant issues pertaining to valuation. So before we start for the session, I would just like to give a brief introduction of the speaker. So Mr. Madhukaran Hiregange is become FCA DISA. He had started the firm Hiregange and Associates almost 30 years back. And he is mentor of this Hiregange Academy, which is an NPO and knowledge and employability initiative. Sir has authored 18 books, started from 1997 on Central Excise, Service Tax, Karnataka VAT, followed by books in the GST. So there are 10 books in the GST where he has authored or he is joint authored or in the process of being written. So he has fostered more than 100 professionals in the industry and practice, active in the fields of spreading awareness through articles and workshop on the various online forum, including hiregangeacademy.com or LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, etc. Many of us know that he was a Central Council member of ICI for 2 terms, wherein he had empowered more like professional to learn the indirect taxes and to do the ethical practice in the area of indirect tax. He has been actively involved in the efforts to make indirect tax laws in India simple, certain and fair, and creating an awareness of the potential knowledge of the indirect taxes in India. So with this background of Madhukar sir, I would like to hand it over the session of the day to him. Before we start, a couple of aspects only. The presentation of the, normally I think we all receive in the morning an email from Zoom. In that email, if you see, you will be getting the link for the presentation of the day. So you can download the presentation from there, so that if there is a video or any screen problem in the streaming, you can use that PPT offline at your system. Any question answer you have, as we have been discussing earlier, there is Q&A panel on your screen. You ask all the question on Q&A panel. We try to cover as many questions as possible in the end of the session. Any unanswered question would be addressed later on and would be shared with you. And as we had discussed yesterday, considering the number of questions being asked, we have increased the time of Q&A session from 15 minutes to half an hour. So effectively the session would be from 10 to 11:30, followed by half an hour question answer session. Wish all of you a very empowerment and joyful learning. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Ashish, for that nice introduction. The times which we are going through can be called a little difficult, but if we see, we have all been blessed. At least the people who are all viewing this, we are all blessed. We are in the top maybe 2% of the economy, and we do not have those challenges which the poor and the uneducated have. However, this particular epidemic or pandemic, what they are calling it, has also led to us having some time at our hands. Maybe it is time for us to reflect, redefine ourselves. If there is any reform needed in our own selves, in our character, attitude, knowledge, skill, these could possibly be focused on in this period, which may extend by another month or so. As far as the academy is concerned, we have been sharing in many ways, including on our website. You have a large number of articles, some of them also hosted on hiregange.com. This is our humble contribution in the same direction. We also plan to come up with an online certificate course in the coming week on GST. Of course, it would be on paid basis. Today, I'll be sharing a few thoughts and insights on valuation in GST. We'll start with some history and then move on to some of the provisions which are important to understand, some basics, and then look at the issues and solutions, including some of the case laws which may be useful for us to understand the new law. So in detail, whatever we see in GST, what is relevant to valuation, will be taking. We will also look at the valuation principles in customs, central excise, and service tax. Because you are all aware, GST is an amalgam of VAT, customs, central excise, and service tax. However, as far as the valuation is concerned, not much has been taken from the VAT laws at all. We should also remember that the local VAT laws were not a very developed law, and it was more of a scrutiny and involvement of the department. The principles or the pristine way in which VAT was supposed to be administered was not done in the VAT regime between 2003 to 2017 when GST came. We'll also look at obviously the valuation in GST, the valuation alternatives, what are the methods when the rules do not apply. We'll also look, within that we will be looking at issues and with the landmark judgments from the customs, excise, and service tax. Q&A, I think, as Ashish said, would be 30 minutes instead of 15 minutes. If we look at today, where we stand in GST vis-a-vis valuation, it is much more complicated than VAT. VAT was pretty simple. There was a transaction value. If you did not have a consideration, there would be no liability. If the consideration was less, you would pay VAT on that lesser consideration. Therefore, it actually fostered a lot of undervaluation due to the fault in the law itself. Valuation in GST is much more complicated than customs or central excise because services were added, and much more complicated than service tax because goods were added. As far as GST is concerned, this is a self-assessment scheme. As such, even the excise and service tax, customs are self-assessment schemes. But if we see the actual administration of the way in which these laws were administered, you would find that it was actually not a self-assessment scheme. There was supposed to be no scrutiny in VAT, but almost all the states had bought back scrutiny through the back door of audit. And therefore, confidence of the SSCs was not got in the VAT regime. Hopefully, in GST, we will have a proper self-assessment over a period of time where the taxpayer will be trusted to discharge his duty. In the Constitution of India, while we have many duties as citizens of India, one of them is not paying taxes. In some countries, paying taxes is a duty of every citizen. India being possibly a poorer country, we have only a small proportion of people paying the direct taxes. And of course, the indirect tax is paid by the consuming public. And therefore, in indirect tax, possibly, everybody pays indirect tax. But they pay it to the service provider or the manufacturer, distributor, retailer, etc. One of the major aspects which is a cause of concern is that revenue officers are not aware and not trained enough in valuation aspects. Therefore, we may see a reinventing of the wheel as far as the case laws are concerned. Remember, these case laws are available to them also. And therefore, they may like to reassess whether those provisions which were settled under customs and central excise or service tax are again agitated, and some of them may again go back to the Supreme Court. Hopefully, the government of India will ensure that its officers are trained and evaluated. The evaluation is very important for every stage. Otherwise, you will have very poor orders being taken. The knowledge of settled laws, if it is not there with the officers, can lead to untold grief to the compliant taxpayer. The information technology, which is the backbone of GST or VAT throughout the world, in India has been taken in a big way. Except for user testing not being done, I think that the government of India is far ahead of the industry and certainly far ahead of the professionals in using information technology. You know that in the direct taxes, even e-hearings have started. That is, the faceless hearings have started. And that is what we can expect in GST2 in years to come. As it is, the interaction with the revenue officers has reduced by 80%, which is very good direction and very good for the future of development of tax in the right way. Corruption, which has been a disease nurtured for many years by government for maybe a decade back, now has started coming down. And in my estimate, it has come down by 70%. As most notices, replies are automated. There is also an accountability built into any investigation, notice, etc., by use of a DIN number as announced by the Honorable Finance Minister. If we look at what were the principles which were borrowed from customs, central excise, etc., we would get an idea where to look when we have a problem. So a couple of slides of mine I am going to spend time on is what was there in the customs law. The customs law had a concept of the invoice price of the exporter outside India, where the price would be adjusted for pre-import costs. That means up to the point from when it got exported from X country to India, all the costs incurred would possibly have to be included. There was also a concept of contemporary imports, which is the value at the time of import. So comparable imports at or around the same time with similar quantity, same or equivalent make, specification was said to be the open market value, and this could be adopted at the time of import without looking into the invoice price. The costs incurred by the importer directly outside India before import, such as certifications, taxes for dismantling machinery, shifting machinery, movement prior to export, etc., would all have to be included in the value as far as customs is concerned. And whenever import was done from related parties, it had to go through a special valuation bench clearance. And this has in the past not been quickly resolved, and sometimes cases used to take years together to settle. If I look at central excise, it also had something which was adopted from customs. And if I were to look at it, since excise was on manufacture, therefore the point of removal from the factory was very important. And there also transaction value or adjusted transaction value used to be used. There were some additions and deletions from the transaction value as defined. So the invoice value might be different and the transaction value could be different. While the transaction value was applied for maybe about 80 to 90% of the transactions under excise, there were two important conditions which were attached to use of transaction value. One was that it had to be the sole consideration. That means that the value should not have been depressed by any way. This could have been depressed by huge advances being given, free supply of certain material or services which were in the obligation of the manufacturer had to be included. Tools, dies, etc., amortization of the tools and dies was to be done. The related party transactions were also suspect, and at that time transaction value was not automatically accepted. In that, the basis would be what was the comparable value price of removal to unrelated parties. That would be the value for the purpose of central excise. Like customs, we also had expenses incurred by the buyer, which were to be incurred by the buyer. If that was existing, that had to be added to the value at the time of removal at the factory gate. The service tax valuation rules came in 2006. Those service tax came in 1994. Non-monetary consideration was added because there could be some quid pro quo. There could be part supply of goods for discharging the value or the price. There could be exchange. Due to all these reasons, in the service tax valuation rules, non-monetary consideration was added. And where it was not determinable, then the comparable arm's length price, again you had a concept of sole consideration in service tax. However, it was impossible as far as services were concerned because of the variables in services. And I do not see any possibility of a comparable arm's length price being confirmed as a general rule. In each and every circumstance, there could be a different conclusion which comes. Even for the same receiver of the service, if I provided services in the month of, say, December, if I had charged them 25,000 rupees, today, under the situation we have, I may possibly charge them 500 rupees as only a token amount, considering it as a gesture towards solidarity to the nation and support to my clients. And therefore, the sole consideration for services under GST would possibly have a lot of issues as far as services are concerned. Again, like you had in customs excise, you also have inclusion of cost or expenditure recovered directly or indirectly by the supplier of the service. And therefore, this is an aspect which has again been carried forward. There were also specific inclusions and exclusions, and some of them have been carried forward into the GST regime. In the service tax regime, there were specific inclusions or exclusion on interest on delayed payment, which in GST, they have specifically included. Also, in the service tax regime, the deduction for immovable property transaction was a little clearer, and it did not take the value of the land into the value of services. This particular aspect, I think, in GST has not been done too well, and therefore you have some unfairness built into the GST law as far as deduction of the actual value of immovable property is concerned. Viewers who are living in metros would certainly agree with me that the land value in any apartment cannot be 33% of the total amount which we pay. In places like Bombay, Gurgaon, Bangalore, I think it is not surprising if the value of the land is just 20%. But however, the law only provides 33% deduction, and therefore the cost of construction is taken at a higher value of 66%, whereas in actuality, it will not be more than 20% or even 15% at times. Therefore, this particular aspect of service tax may be relevant when we look at challenging any valuation of immovable property in GST. If I were to look at the valuation in GST now, till now I gave a background of what was the old law, and the reason for that was that wherever there is a similarity between the old law and the new law, the old case laws would come in handy to understand exactly where we stand. Under GST, we have section 15, which specifically provides for the value. And again, it says that transaction value would be considered, which is the invoice value. And you would also find that in 90% of the cases, transaction value itself is sufficient. However, wherever the transaction value is between related persons, it would have to go through the test of not being impacted due to the relationship. And also one more aspect of sole consideration, that is the only amount which is receivable and which is the obligation of the supplier, is something which will have to be confirmed. We will look at each of these a little more. In case this is not so, then the valuation rules between 27 and 35 would come into play, and value would be determined as per the rules. We'll also briefly look at the rules. If we look at the section, it says supply of goods, where price actually paid or payable is what is being captured, where the supplier and recipient are not related and price is the sole consideration. Who are the related parties? Unfortunately, the definition of related party is very wide. any officer, director of two companies, partners in two firms, employee and employer, directly or indirectly, the person who owns or controls 25% voting rights, entities which are controlled by another entity, and members of family. This is for individuals. Sole agent, or the person who is the, you can say, sole buyer or agent or concessionaire or distributor. You know, we have this concept of super stockist and sole agent, etc. Those would all be considered to be related parties. And therefore, whenever transactions are between these two, then there would be a need for us to look at how is the valuation done. At this point, I would also like to remind you, which was explained in the levy session by Rajesh, that there is a related party requirement which is important there, where it says that transactions between related party without consideration also would be liable to GST and would be considered a supply. And therefore, if there are entities which are having transactions with each other, if I were to take an example, large number of educational institutions in India are run on a non-profit basis, and they are all couple of trusts which work within themselves. So if one trust were to let out the building which it has constructed to another trust, there would be a liability for paying the GST on the rentals, and this rental will have to be the open market value, and therefore these type of transactions would also have to be valued properly, otherwise they would result in unnecessary demands going forward along with penalties and interest. What are the exclusions? Like in all the other laws, in GST also you have discounts. You have discounts which are given before or at the time of supply. This is very important to be recorded in the invoice. Sometimes what can be done, what is done also, is that at the time of supply, depending on market conditions, some incentive is added into the packet itself. For example, when I am distributing the boxes which contain 100 units of a particular, say, soap or something like that, and the market is not doing too well, I may add a mixer in that box. I may add a gold coin in that box. And this is, remember, at the time of supply, and therefore this would be a discount. In case after the supply has been affected, I wish to reduce the GST, which I had originally charged at the time of supply, then the discount is deductible only if it is established in terms of the agreement and specifically linked to the invoice under which the supply was made. Further condition is that the receiver, the distributor, retailer, OEM would have to reverse the GST to that extent. If these two conditions are there, then even after the supply has been done, GST can be deducted. There is a question which I have for all of you. Is there a need to exclude the discount from value of payment of GST? Is the moot question. This you may look at. Many times we need not get into this exercise of trying to get the GST paid in excess at the time of supply back, because as of now it is a very cumbersome procedure, and reconciliations have to be prepared, care to be taken that the ITC reversal at the other end is actual, not just stated, and therefore many times discount after the supply could even be a basic value discount rather than touching on GST. We will not require to do any exclusion at all as far as GST payment is concerned. What are the inclusions? The inclusions are taxes other than GST if we are recovering from the buyer or the receiver. If I were to look at the costs incurred by the recipient, if it is the liability of the supplier and it has been incurred by the recipient, it is not to be included in the price. The obligation is very important. If the recipient is obliged to spend it, then it will not be a problem. But if the supplier's obligation is being incurred by the recipient, then there is a requirement to include. There could also be some incidental expenses which in the past had created a lot of problem, like transportation charges, packing charges, commission, etc., which were directly linked to the supply itself. These are liable to be included if they are before the supply. Interest or late fee or penalty for delayed payment of any consideration for supply also has been specifically included. This was not there in either the central excise law or the service tax law earlier. Subsidies, which are important in a country like India, where we still have 40% below the poverty line, linked to the supply, are allowed to be deducted as long as they are given by the central government and state government. The important point here would be that they should be linked to the supply and should be given by only the government. If I were to understand inclusions a little better, taxes specifically charged and recovered only would be included. TDS, which is also very common, especially for your services, etc., is not to be included as it is not an additional tax paid. It's only a collection mechanism, and the TDS goes to the credit of the person from whom it's deducted, from whose payment it is deducted. Amount incurred by the recipient, I again want to stress, we have to examine whose obligation it is. If it is the supplier's obligation, include. If it is not in his scope, do not include. And you will see this principle going across even in the concept of free of cost supplies. All amounts incurred by the supplier and recovered from the recipient up to the point of supply, even if it is not through the invoice but through debit notes, would have to be included. And as I said, as far as interest on delayed payment is concerned, it will have to be included. However, a concession has been given that only if it is received, I might charge interest on delayed payment to my customers, clients, etc. Only when they pay. At that time, it will be liable to be paid. Otherwise, it's not liable to be paid. I think this is a very sound philosophy which has been added for this delay. Further, if I look at the law, wherever it cannot be determined, value cannot be determined, then it will be as may be prescribed. And these have been prescribed in certain cases. And I'm sure as time goes, wherever there is a difficulty, more will be prescribed. Sometimes there may be so many issues in a particular product or service that it leads to a lot of confusion, in which case the government can step in and on the recommendation of the GST Council can specify the manner in which it should be specified. Here, there may be a possibility that if it is unreasonable, illogical, unfair, inequitable, there could be a chance of challenge. If I were to look at what are those cases when I have to look at the rules, supplier and recipient are related. There is a non-monetary consideration. The consideration which I am receiving is not wholly in money, where there is a reason to doubt the truth and accuracy of the transaction itself. Sometimes industries itself are known to be a little less compliant, and those industries, these type of issues may come up. There is also a concept of pure agent, and in case I am a pure agent, then that amount need not be included. But what is a pure agent? What are the conditions when I can use that pure agency is very important, which we'll be touching on a little later. There are also certain types of transactions which are difficult to follow the normal valuation principles. Therefore, for money changers, insurance, air travel agents, lottery distributors, there are specific methods set out and as notified by central government, as I had said earlier. Some issues. Now I get into the issues. For the next 1 hour, I'll be taking you through some of the issues. Please ensure that whatever I say is verified and validated at your end. When I am speaking of something, it's always in context of what is my knowledge, and it is not specific to what is the circumstance which you have. Therefore, when I am giving any opinion on this call, in this seminar, please assume that I am 90% correct and could be 10% incorrect, due to the fact that I am not a Sarvajnani. I have reasonable knowledge of law and a bit of experience in indirect taxes. With that caveat, I would like to start. Liquidated damages deducted from the invoice as per the contract. Can we claim deduction? The answer is yes. If it is as per the contract, whatever amounts are deducted, you can claim that deduction and you can get the GST credits back. Obviously, the receiver should have reversed that credit or not availed that credit. Liquidated damages could also be imposed by the receiver or the buyer or service recipient by way of debit note. Could it be said that it is a supply? Now it also depends on the contract, but if we have to answer this question, it could be a supply. Let's look at one of the major issues which keeps coming, which I would like to explain through why a contract is very, very important. The professionals are advised to ensure that they see the contracts before they give any opinion, before they do any audit, and before they give any reply for audit, revenue audit notes, or give a reply to a show cause notice or fight an appeal. The contract is for 2 crores. The contract also specifies that customer will provide 10 tons of steel, cement and 2 tons of steel. Here, whose obligation it is to provide the 10 tons of cement and steel? It is with the customer, not the obligation of the supplier or the works contractor or the builder contractor. Therefore, in this case, the liability for GST will be only on 2 crores. However, let's take an alternative. The contract is for 4 crores and it allows for deduction of 2 crores for similar supply by the customer. In this case, there could be a question: what is the value which should go for GST? In these cases, I would recommend that you can use a system or a philosophy of merging safety with ITC. It could be done in a way that the customer will supply all these material, that is this 10 tons of cement and 2 tons of steel. They would supply under an invoice to the contractor, while it is very clearly said that this is something which is part of the contract. Now, the contractor in this case would take credit of approximately 22%. That is the average between 28%. Or in this case, it could be even 25%. So 25% of 2 crores will be 50 lakhs. The contractor will take credit for 50 lakhs, and on 4 crores, he will discharge the tax at the rate of 18% or 12% as the case may be. If you look at it practically and financially, this is beneficial for the contractor. Therefore, I see little reason not to ensure that all the supplies by all the free of cost supplies are also sent by the customer and included in the contract and paid GST paid on that. One important caveat in such case would be, please keep the department or the revenue informed in writing by way of registered post to the jurisdictional officer of yours or your clients. Again, as I said, obligation in this case. Let me look at the rules briefly. What are the rules? What do they say? Rule 27 talks about when the consideration is not wholly in money. While reading the valuation, it may also be a good idea to understand what consideration is. I think in the earlier session on levy, there was discussion on consideration. And obviously, anybody who is going to be complying with the GST law or advising on the GST law should understand consideration very, very well. And in the last slide, I have also provided which could be the resources which you can depend on, validated resources other than WhatsApp, which is not reliable, where you can get good advice or good direction. As far as 27 is concerned, we are talking of open market value. Just like customs, any buyer can buy without any restriction. That is an arm's length price. The old law in excise talked about comparable prices. As far as the timing, quantity, state of the stocks, say I have non-moving stocks, then I might like to reduce my price. And as a marketing strategy, I might have 10 products and I might have ensures that consumers get a good feeling about me and I am able to sell the other items. For example, you would be surprised that many of the paint companies, if you get into their profitability or their cost audit reports, you will find that the major income is not from the sale of paints, but it is on the services, and it could be even on the sale of consumables like the additives to that particular paint, the dyes, the colors, the turpentine, the paint brush, where the margins could be even 500, 600%, whereas on the paint it would be maybe 5-10%. This is just an example to tell you. In such cases, open market value possibly has to be taken. And if there is money and money equivalent, part is money, part is equivalent. We are all used to going for sales where we carry our old stove, our old mixer, our old TV, and as far as cars are concerned, whether the same brand or another brand, and we get something off for it. Now, what is the value of that item which is supplied by that particular car dealer or that TV dealer? The value cannot change because I am giving something else in return. And therefore, the GST would be payable on the gross value. Say, for example, a new TV is given for 20,000 rupees and you have given your old TV. The GST would be payable on 21,000 itself. Say this is also not available, or this is not determinable, not applicable. In such cases, we can look at the value of the product or the service which is of like kind and quality. As far as goods is concerned, it's very much possible, though there are a lot of disputes. With a little reasonable difference, goods, it is possible. In my considered view, for services, this is just not possible. Anyway, these are matters which may take another decade or two to get clarity as far as value of like kind and quality of service is concerned. Where we have the second part, that is the equivalent not being determinable, then we can go to rule 30 and 31, at which time money plus whatever that is, that amount has to be added to arrive at the value on which GST has to be paid. When I am having dealings with my own entity, which is in different states, we have a need to discharge the GST. Even if I'm dealing with my related person, I need to discharge the GST whether or not consideration is there. Again, I'm not going to repeat. Open market value, like, kind and quality for goods is going to continue. And of course, if it doesn't work, then you can go to 30 and 31. Here they have given certain exceptions. The exceptions are that where goods are for further sale. For example, you are working through distributors, etc., where the price at which the retailer will sell is regulated to some extent by you. In that case, 90% of the recipient sale price to independent buyers could be adopted by you. Now here, there would be a need to establish what is that 90% sale price to independent buyer of your recipient. This may be quite challenging. Unless this information is available, we should not go in for this. If related or distinct person is, you are dealing with a related or distinct person, a very big concession has been given that in case the distinct person, that is the branch in, say, Haryana of my office in Bangalore, is able to avail 100% ITC, then invoice price would be accepted. The invoice price then could be a reasonable amount or just a nominal amount. However, in case my branch or the related party to whom I am supplying the goods or services is having any nil rated activity, supply, it has any exempt supply, it has any non-taxable supply, then automatically 100% ITC is not available. Maybe 95% ITC is available, but then I cannot use the invoice price. I'll have to go back to open market value or Rule 3031, etc. As far as an agent is concerned, there have been changes made in the GST law. In the erstwhile VAT law, there used to be no tax as far as the agent is concerned, whereas in the GST regime, since it is on supply and not sale, there is a liability. Now for agent, the rule specifies 90% of the price at which the agent sells, and or if that is not determinable, again 3031. Therefore 3031 become important for all of us to understand. What is 30? 30 is cost of supply. Now, if we were to take the cost of supply, this cannot be an ad hoc amount. It has to be properly fixed. And in the past regime, remember, this cost of manufacture was one of the valuation principles in the central excise regime. And there also it used to be 100%, 110% of the cost of manufacture. Here, if I look at GST, it will not only be restricted to cost of manufacture, it will be restricted, it will also be extended to cost of acquisition, cost of provision of services. There is a cost accounting standard 4, which can preferably be used, and when I use a standard, I build in a de-risking possibility that if I am using a standard duly certified by a cost accountant, then that transaction value will have to be accepted and will be proper unless there is any fraud or misrepresentation involved. If I were to look at it, where is this preferable? Builder service to the landlord. This could be a possibility. However, we'll have to cross the point of whether it is compulsory for us to use that 66.66% deemed value of the construction, whether it will stand judicial scrutiny. Therefore, please take an expert opinion if you are going to use cost of supply for builder services to the landlord. There are of course a lot of arguments which say that the services which are given to the landlord are not at all services, and they are only a compensation for the land, and also that whatever the services provided to the landlord are recovered by the builder in the portion he sells. There is also a case law for this. I think it was covered in the levy segment of this particular series of seminars, webinars. The residual rule is that it should be consistent with general principles under section 15. Now, this is a very, very vague, what I could say, others basket, and many people may fall into this also. In case you fall into this, you may have to refer to the case laws in similar activities in customs, in central excise and service tax. Let's look at some of the basic issues in valuation further. Corporate guarantee commission. Many people feel this is part of the investment in new markets, regions, products within the group, and it needs to be fostered, and at some point of time when that
I think there is some network problem. Just bear with us for a couple of minutes.
Yeah.
Sir, I think there was some connection problem. You need to restart from the corporate guarantee portion.
Will do. Am I audible now?
Yes, sir, you are audible, sir.
Yeah. This is the power cut for some time, so I'm using my mobile now. Anyway, I will again restart for those who I would have missed for about a minute and a half. The corporate guarantee is a part of the investment which groups make in certain markets, certain regions, and within certain products, where they give corporate guarantee to the banks. They could give it to the suppliers. They could also give it to as a, as a what I could say, as a buttress to the customers who buy from you. Therefore, in this case, whether it is a supply is the first question. My answer to that is that I think it is certainly a supply, and corporate guarantees given by banks are charged, and service tax is certainly leviable on them. And within the group, there may not be a charge, but as they are related party transactions, a comparable value would have to be adopted by following some reasonable method. Provide essential goods manufactured by self free of cost to COVID stranded citizen through Ramakrishna Ashram. This is an example I'm taking, which is real. You know, India is a giving society. All of us give in some way or the other. And as I said in the starting of my talk, this is actually the time for us who are the blessed lot to give to society. So if some essential goods are given, manufactured by somebody, and free of cost they are given to a Ramakrishna Ashram, the comparable price would be 5 crores. Would it be a supply? It is not a supply because it's not to a related person. Ramakrishna Ashram is not related to me or any manufacturing unit. Therefore, it may not be a supply for a consideration, not liable at all. However, ITC reversal of whatever that 60 lakhs or so, which may be some credit taken for those same product, would need to be reversed. Say the same item is not supplied at 60 lakh, 5 crores, which is the comparable price, but it is supplied at 5 lakhs. Then the value would be considered as 5 lakhs as far as supply is concerned. Again, I would ask some of you who would like to understand this further to go back to the value recording which has been done, which will be provided to you by end of tomorrow. This will also be accessible to all of you, not only you, I think it will be accessible to the whole of India on YouTube. You could go back there and examine how you could do this. Have a look through the provisions when you do this. In such a case, possibly ITC also will be available. We have another session on ITC. Hopefully the speaker at that time will cover that also. When we are looking at valuation, the transaction value would be accepted unless whole consideration aspects are violated. This is a very old case in 1996 of Basant Industries. Supreme Court set out this. So unless there is a taint which is visible, unless there is a suppression in the price, the transaction value should be accepted. When open market value is concerned, many times we have seen that the revenue in its zeal to collect extra monies will rely on unrelated quotations, uncomparable quotations, not at the same time, not in the same volume, not of the same brand. And therefore, those unrelated quotations and bills cannot be made the basis of arriving at the open market value. At this time, it may be a good idea that the manufacturer or the consultant who is arguing on this behalf, supporting this particular dispute, may provide as evidence real, proper bills and quotations, contracts to establish the open market value. There is a common practice, that the job worker adjusts the scrap, and therefore he adjusts when quoting. For example, if I am doing machining of a copper product. Now, copper is very expensive base metal. So while doing this particular part, I may get 20% scrap. In such a case, my job work charge, which is 100 rupees in normal course, if I had to send back the scrap, if the customer allows me to sell the scrap myself, I may just charge him 10 rupees. The scrap which is being sold by the job worker has gone to depress the price of that job work. And therefore, in such cases, the adjustment for that scrap needs to be done. This can be done in various ways, and I will not get into the mechanism of that. When there are transactions between holding and subsidiary to holding, price to independent comparable parties may be taken which are at arm's length. This is also confirmed by Supreme Court in a customs case, fraudulent. In all these cases, you might have to refer to Excus or Toil or India Kanun to get the details. Sometimes in our distribution channel, we have del creditor agents. There are people in between who sell to the large retailers. Now these people are very keen to see that the market keeps improving. They support the retailers by extending monies to them. Whether this can be added as a consideration is a question which can arise. This is certainly not a consideration. It is like any bank financing somebody. Only thing here, the agent through whom the purchase is made extends loans to the retailers or distributors, and he takes the risk of them not paying. In case they don't pay, the del creditor agent will make good that amount to the manufacturer or the importer. Sometimes in the past, we had a case where Fiat had introduced a new model, and to ensure that it penetrates the market and at a later point of time they would be able to make money out of it, they sold it at below the import cost itself. At that time, there was an investigation done, and Supreme Court said that even a future market penetration can amount to an additional consideration at a future time. And therefore, there was a requirement for Fiat to pay crores of rupees based on the cost of manufacture plus 10%. And this almost brought them down to their knees. Sometimes we'll have to look at some valuation issues, which I expect now in the next 4 months. The original equipment manufacturer, whether it's a car, TV, anybody who is selling white goods, I think is going to give massive discounts in the coming few months. And when they do, they may be selling below cost also. It's a slowdown, but it is a commercial and what a prudent businessman would do. Therefore, in such cases, open market value of some other period, some other time will not be adopted, and that lower price will be accepted as the proper price. Whether discount can be called a marketing service is a question which was raised in the erstwhile service tax regime. And I don't know whether to service tax or excise. I think it was in excise regime. In the case of MICO, there it was said that what is accounted as a discount in the books, it's only a special discount, and the discount which was given to TVS cannot be said to be marketing service from TVS. This is very important considering the recent confusion galore which came about due to the circular being implemented in the GST regime, and that luckily for us that circular was again removed. However, some principles of the circular were valid, and you may have to go back to the old law if you have to look at what is the service given by the supplier, by the recipient back to the supplier. There could be cases, however, for example, when there is a requirement, when there is something like an advertising campaign done by the distributor himself, he is doing it to enhance his sale and thereby his commission. But while doing this, he may also have this particular exercise being done jointly with the brand name owner or the main supplier. In such case, the service of marketing which is provided is certainly a service, and therefore in such cases, the recipient would have to invoice the original supplier. Supplier, of course, can take the credit. This is also a way out of this particular problem which many people face. You may like to examine this further with your expert consultant. Pure agent reimbursements which were there, they are not liable and they have been held to be so. International consultants, again, the Supreme Court has confirmed this particular point, and in fact at that point of time they even said the rule itself is ultra vires. Therefore, whenever there are attempts made, even under the GST law, for reimbursements, what is a reimbursement? We have to understand. Go to the definition of pure agent, see that you fall into that, and then whether you are fulfilling the 3 conditions mentioned thereafter. If you are able to be a pure agent and fulfill those conditions, then that value can never be added to the valuation. And at that time, the Supreme Court decision in international consultants would certainly come in useful and be applicable in GST. I would like to observe here that the number of conditions which are there in GST as compared to the service tax law are less. This is an important aspect you may like to consider if there is any dispute in this regard. When I look at discounts and various schemes, I thought that maybe I should spend a little more time on these. There could be a discount given to clear stocks. There could be a discount given when a new model or is introduced in the market, or there is a change in model. In all these cases, the discount given cannot be questioned. For example, I have an old model of phone. You know that today, most of us spend a large proportion of our income yearly on this gadget mobile phone. And whenever there is a change in model, the old model falls by 40–50%. And therefore, at that time, taking the comparable value, etc., may not be proper. Therefore, discounts given at that time, if any, would be eligible as a discount. However, remember, what is deductible is only the discount which is available and known at the time of supply. Therefore, whenever there is a change in the model, possibly it cannot be a discount at all. And therefore, the retailer would have to pay GST on the full value of consideration which he receives, A, from the customer, B, from the importer, supplier or manufacturer supplier. Example, if there is a mobile phone which is where there is a change in the model, and Samsung or whoever else, Oppo, they bring out a scheme for the retailer where they say that this phone which I supplied to you at 40,000 rupees, please sell to the customer at 15,000 rupees. The 25,000 rupees gap which is there, I will make up to you. In such a case, the retailer would have to charge the GST on 40,000 itself, not on 15,000 which he receives from the customer. The principle for discount being eligible, which are genuine and for good reasons, could be supported by the Supreme Court decision in Eicher Tractors, which was in 2000. There was also a very celebrated case of MRF, which is thousands of pages. So probably you will have to take a PDF copy and look at wherever discount is coming and read that part of it. In the last decade, we have seen that the perception in the mind of people has become the most important thing. Many of us end up buying things which we do not even require, and certainly it makes no difference in our life. All of us have also got attracted to this thought process that something is coming free to me. I am saving money when I buy something, and therefore this is being used well by the people in the marketing part of all the products which we buy. You have schemes like one free for buying one. Buy one, take one free. Toothbrush with paste free. Combination of taxable at different rates. It could be taxable, non-taxable also could be there. You have combinations which are there in the schemes. So when the rate of the product is the same, it doesn't make a difference. But if the rate is not different, then there can be a marked difference. Or would it lead to a understanding that when I provide buy one, take one free, whether the one which is free is really free? My question is, in this commercial world, there is absolutely nothing which is given free. Only the gratuitous type of actions, now say contribution for COVID victims, competition, contribution to give free meals to those laborers who have got stranded. For the poor in society who are not able to access, who are not living with their families, they have got stuck in the cities. These type of activities which we do are actually free. But in normal business, there's hardly anything free. Therefore, in my understanding, all schemes would be eligible for discount as long as it is at the time of supply, it is known at the time of supply, or before the supply, it is incurred or known. Gold coin free to distributor, retailer in one season. It is put into the packet itself of goods, and therefore it is before supply automatically, and therefore that is certainly a discount which is given and eligible. There can be different types of discounts. A target category dealers. While I make a scheme at the time of at the start of the year, I make a scheme that if the distributor is able to order for more than 10,000 boxes, then I will give him a Hawaii trip free. Is this a discount or not? My answer is this is also a discount. This is something which goes to reduce the value of that particular transaction. So therefore, in such cases, this value of this Hawaii trip which is provided to the distributor is inbuilt in the price itself. So I may sell the product at 1,000 rupees, and I say that if you pick up 10,000 boxes, I will send you to Hawaii. In such a case, the value of that Hawaii trip need not be added to the supplier's value at all. It is a discount, it's a price reduction, which is accepted. Similarly, even for a large Jaguar car, when somebody reaches a target of 20 crores of sale, maybe in case of distributors, this is possible. Even though India is a poor country, we find that the expensive cars are still getting sold. Maybe not, this may not happen in the next 6 months is what I think. But anyway, this was happening earlier. Even this would be available. Let's look at the manufacturers. We have manufacturers where we have design drawings provided to contract manufacturers. As you are aware, the system of contract manufacturing and job manufacturing is a system by which quality is enhanced. A person does something day in and day out, he becomes an expert at that. And therefore, once one is an expert, then many people would come to them, such an expert, to get the work done from his side. Designs and drawings are given along with the part number to a contract manufacturer who manufactures that particular part and gives it back. Now, whether the notional value of these designs and drawings have to be added to the price which is being charged by this by such third-party contract manufacturers or anybody who is getting this benefit. This is a moot question, and I think in the auto industry, thousands of notices were also issued in the recent past, maybe about 6-8 months back. There is also a very good article on this on our blog, which can be, if needed, referred to. If I look at this, again, we may have to go back to the old laws to find out how is it, whether this would be applicable and what would be the circumstances where it would be applicable, when it would not be applicable, what are the defenses possible to say that designs and drawing cost should not be included in the cost of contract manufacturing. The first answer I would have is that the contract manufacturer is not allowed to sell in the market. He only gives it back to the OEM or the original equipment manufacturer, and therefore it is a revenue neutral transaction, and therefore too much of focus on this by the revenue may not be necessary at all. However, if the contract manufacturer sells to the outside world, then I would say that these design drawing costs need to be added by him when he sells to the outside world. This is only my view. You would like to see the decision in customs of Associated Cement Companies where there was an import of goods, there was also an import of technical know-how. It is not know-how, it is know-how. I'm sorry for that English mistake which is there in the slide. So in this particular decision, the Supreme Court observed that the import of technical know-how was to understand and adopt practices to manufacture that particular item. The designs and drawings were used for that. And the fact that later they imported some raw material from the same person does not mean that it is linked to that import. Since there was no link between the technical know-how and the import, the value of the drawings and designs were not required to be added to the imported price. This could be an important indicator for disputes which come in this case. Supply of goods for services. You know that there were a lot of disputes in the past where the question which was there for in the construction industry was where there is a supply of steel or cement which is provided free of cost by the service receiver in the service tax era. There was a larger decision of Bayana Builders wherein they observed that there is no requirement of adding the free of cost supplies by the customer. And this has also been confirmed by the Supreme Court. This decision was in 2013. I am not saying that this decision would be 100% applicable to the GST regime. In fact, there are certain other decisions where there is a little doubt on this also. Therefore, as far as services is concerned, one might like to go for an expert opinion, and in the circumstances in which that particular transaction is happening, it may or may not be liable to be added. The supply of materials, molds and dies free of cost is something which has been going on for time immemorial. There was also a circular which was issued, which I think more or less captures some part of the understanding which we have on whose obligation is it. If the obligation of providing the molds and dies is of the recipient, then that amortization or that need to add some part of the molds and dies to your charges may not be job work charges, for example, or contract manufacturing charges may not be valid. Again, your ACC decision, which we have referred to earlier, and a host of other decisions would come for you to study and see what is applicable and what is not. Therefore, I would say that wherever goods are supplied back to the OEM, there is no problem at all. That is my understanding, subject to the courts finally deciding what they decide. However, if it is supplied to the market, I think that the amortized costs would have to be added. For example, I am a manufacturer of motorcycle parts, and my OEM customer who buys from me buys some part of my production which he uses within the motorcycles which he produces, and I also sell in the market. In case I am selling to the market, the price of the goods which I sell in the market cannot be without the addition of the prorated cost of free material supplied by the OEM or the molds or dies. You may say in commercial parlance, it does not make sense that somebody will sell at a lower rate. However, remember, only when transactions are tainted are they questioned. When there is a difference between the market value and the value at which the supplier provides to the market, only then these questions come. Example would be, if I were to go to JC Road in Bangalore and a particular product is being sold at 100 rupees, and if the price of that product at the time when it leaves the contract manufacturer's place is only 30 rupees, this is certainly a cause of concern, and it would indicate some sort of a suppression in value. In such cases, revenue would be right to take up and recover the differential costs with comparable goods which are sold. You are aware that there is a deduction, there used to be a deduction of 75% for land in the service tax regime for residential apartments. Now, whether this ad hoc deduction of 75% for that land was right or not was examined in the case of Suresh Kumar Bansal, and the Supreme Court in 2016 said that ad hoc deductions are not proper and the actual deduction may be taken. There are a number of other decisions which are also there. There's also an interesting article written by one C.A. Venkata Prasad. You might like to read it in the blog. In GST, there is a 66% deemed value for construction, which comes through the tariff. Now, whether this is mandated, whether this is legal, whether it would be different from service tax are questions which are being challenged and will be decided by the courts in due course of time. if you were to ask me for my personal opinion, I think that this needs to be struck down because it is absolutely ridiculous and inequitable. Let me take an example. In Bombay, at least 3 months back, there were residential apartments being sold at 50,000 rupees per square feet. What would be the construction cost of this apartment? It cannot be more than 3,000 to 4,000 rupees, even if they use imported granite. Then if it is 3,000 to 4,000 rupees, then is it justifiable that you charge GST on 37,500? And the GST on that, if I were to look at a rate of 18%, what would that be? That amount will be
There is some connection problem. Couple of minutes.